Your book is a memoir of how you got here, your personal story, and the personal story, and it is a great read. But what I think is also interesting, as I said right at the beginning, is the confessional. And of course, you know that there are people, the progressives, who say, well, where's the apology? Where's the acknowledgement of complicity? Well, you do that. In the book, you do write that you feel some responsibility for people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, because you didn't fight the good fight the whole time. You write that you didn't traffic in hate, but you do say that you were part of the system that did. Talk to me
Yeah.
about that, because I think a lot of people, and I would certainly put myself in this category, you knew this stuff was going on over there, but you figured, why make an issue of it? They're allies. That's the crazy uncle in the corner, and we didn't confront the extremists and the bigots.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right. Because, to an extent, it was this idea of it's coalition, right? Yeah, we're going to have the crazies, the bigots, the extremists. They're voting Republican. They're going to
Yeah.
vote for me in the primary, maybe, and they're going to vote for me in the general election. And so, if somebody says something that's, I don't know, racist or insane, instead of pushing back like John McCain did, for instance, when the lady called Obama Muslim, you just kind of chuckle or shake your head or just say, like, I'll look into that. I mean, that was the favorite one. It's like, hey, did you know that,
Yeah.
the UN's going to kill all Christians? It's like, oh, really? I didn't know. I'll look into that. Right. And you look at, like, do I consider myself pushing those theories? No. But could I have pushed back harder? Yes. Could I have, gone on Fox News specifically for a hit saying that Jade Helm, which was this conspiracy theory in 2015,
Ooh.
that Obama was going to take over Texas, that it was
Yeah.
false? I could have. Did I do that?
Yeah.
No, because I only wanted to go on Fox News for hits that actually
Sure.
the Fox News viewers would like. And so,
Right.
yeah, all of that comes into play.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember that as well. We laughed at it, we rolled our eyes, but like, why spend any time? Because you don't have to worry about that, right? And we want to come back to this, because I keep thinking about all the times that we should have pushed back against that, but we rationalized not doing it. We would tell ourselves it's just a small number of people; it's not that important, and we'll get to that. So you spent a lot of your time growing up in rural Illinois. I mean, and one of the great stories of our time has been this dramatic shift of rural voters from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party, or more Republican. Give me some sense of what is going on, because you write about this in the book, that across the Midwest, places like West Virginia, what happened after 2008. I mean, 28.
Yeah.
During the Great Recession, the opioid epidemic. What happened?
So if you look at, first off, you can start with the 90s with the disappearance of manufacturing, right? And of course, the Midwest, where you and I are from, heavy manufacturing area. And that's actually made a pretty significant comeback, but still,
Yeah.
it's taken some damage compared to what it was. And you have a lot of people in their 50s that were trained in the manufacturing that, lose their jobs, and they're almost too old to go retrain, or they think they're too old to go retrain. And society seems to kind of push them aside. And yeah, we can give them unemployment benefits, but that doesn't make you feel like a useful person. And so people were turning to drugs, right? That's why you had a huge opioid epidemic, particularly in places like West Virginia and the Midwest. And then all of a sudden the economy collapses, and probably rightfully, that you had to bail out the banks to keep the financial institution alive. But the perception also rightfully was that, Washington only cared about the big banks and not the little person.
Right.
And so there was this growing resentment, plus the fact that any of the media you watched portrayed Christians, for instance, as, crazy people or out of touch or superstitious. It betrayed the values of San Francisco or New York City. And so Donald Trump comes along, and I guess the saddest thing is he's the biggest con artist of anything. But he comes along and he knows enough, in your words, in his lizard brain to put words to that angst people are feeling. So he tells West Virginia, we're going to put you back in the coal business, which of course he never did. We're going to return your factories. These people over there, they suck. And he put a voice to that. And that's why I think you've seen this massive shift. I mean, I have an uncle that used to kind of brag that he would vote Democratic sometimes. It's now one of Trump's biggest supporters, because he just put voice to that. And so that's what I think a big thing is that happened.
This is an important point, because, and again, you write about this, these people felt unheard. They didn't see themselves portrayed. They thought they were being looked down upon. And the people were looking for somebody with an inspirational message. So these were people who looked at Ronald Reagan, looked at Barack Obama, who addressed their isolation. They felt they were heard by them. But you're right. What they got was a person who turned that isolation into hate. And Trump gave people a license to say racist things, anti-immigrant things, anti-Semitic things. He basically also said, you are not responsible for this. He came up with, and again, there's a long history to this, saying, blame these people. It's the immigrants. It's those people. And somehow that connected. The Democrats look at this and they go, well, hold it. These are people who should be voting for, voted for, FDR, who voted for Lyndon Johnson, who voted for John F. Kennedy and Harry Truman. They voted for Barack Obama. Why are they not listening to us right now? We are the party of the working class and the little man. And yet that's not the way it played out in the Midwest. And my sense is there are still a lot of Democrats that don't understand this.
There are, because, and I don't know where the shift happened, but at some point the Democrats went from, think of like a Bill Clinton, who basically spoke blue collar language, to where we are today. And look, Democrats get upset at me for saying this if you want.
Joe Biden's a blue collar guy. Yeah, but
yep.
Joe Biden speaks blue collar, right?
Yeah, he does. And he's up against the fact that, again, some people are willing to use the fire of anger that he's not willing to use. And, if Joe Biden decided, which he wouldn't, because I don't think his soul would allow it, to become anti-immigrant and blame the Mexicans, maybe he'd gain some ground among this. Or if he had the ability, which I think is tough for him, maybe it's advanced age, maybe it's just not natural, to basically inspire and saying, a different thing, then that's possible. But, when you have a party that they don't necessarily embrace it, but they tolerate Tlaib, for instance, blaming Israel for bombing in Gaza when it's completely untrue. This defund the police, get mad at me for it, but there still is a perception that the Democratic Party is against funding the police. That's not my problem. That's a Democratic problem. That's something that's very important to the middle-class voters in areas where you and I come from. And, and the other thing is just, look, everybody in their heart has a battle daily between like light and dark, right? And it's easy to let darkness overtake you. Right. And when a man stands in front of you and whispers the dark parts of your heart and gives you permission to use those dark parts of your heart, it overtakes. And that's what's happened.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a crucial point. But a lot of these folks, if you appeal to the better angels of their nature, they would, you don't want to be that person. You don't want to have these views. They would respond to that. But what's happened is that they have tapped into it. So you had an event in New York and you're there, and by the way, you're a family man. This is great. This is reality. This is reality podcast. I have a dog here. You have, because you're a young dad. So let's talk about the Tea Party. Because this is fascinating to me, the way the Tea Party has morphed and the role that it played. You said in New York, the Tea Party had been the weird table at GOP events, but now the more extreme you can be has become the essence of how Republicans show themselves to be conservative now. It's not what you believe. It's become about being the craziest person in the room, the most extreme person in the room. So, for example, on the abortion issue, well, an abortion ban at 15 weeks. No, you have to say an abortion ban at 6 weeks. So the Tea Party, I thought the Tea Party was a legit thing in the beginning. It was interesting to watch how it became a grift, how it became extreme, and it became about something completely different than we thought it was about, right?
The first Tea Party event I went to was in New Lenox, Illinois, and there were 8,000 or 10,000 people that showed up. Yeah. So you think about that. What was that? What were those 8,000 or 10,000 people? They were folks that were upset with Obamacare. They were upset with government spending. They were basically Republicans. I mean, that's just what it was, just a large group of Republicans that were having their voice heard. And when the GOP won the majority, the vast majority of them said, okay, we did our job, and they went home. The problem is these organizations that were formed continued. And so I would go to Tea Party meetings after that would have 1,000 and then 500, and then it would end up like 20 people there. And what you had was this paring down of the normals to the extremes that finally, for the first time, had what they felt like people were paying attention to them and their crazy ideas. And that became the Tea Party. Look, I was considered a Tea Party darling in 2010. Right. I never once And I even proactively pushed back against the idea of voting against increasing the debt limit. I said, no, of course you have to increase the debt limit. Everybody's like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Can you imagine saying that in front of a Tea Party now? And it just goes to show how it evolved from just normal kind of upset conservatives to what it is today.
I remember just in real time watching this, and I know there'll be listeners who will say, "Oh, this was all astroturfing; it was all the Koch brothers or whatever." Maybe eventually it became that, but it starts off as a movement, and then it becomes this racket. I think there's a famous quote about this, and it became this organized grift that was dominated by the extremists, which in many ways followed the trajectory of the Republican Party. I mean, I remember how the Tea Party Express for about 5 minutes was actually, anti-Donald Trump, because they kind of recognized that he had nothing to do with what they were talking about. He was not interested in fiscal responsibility. He was the king of debt and everything. But of course, like everybody else, they flipped the switch. They became something else because the script demanded, we don't actually care about entitlements or about deficits or about debt. We care about who's going to give us these dopamine hits. And that's how it's so much of the media and so much of the organized Republican Party and that ecosystem around it became, right? It became more and more intense, more performative.
And by the way, with dopamine hits comes money, right? Yeah. Because if you can tickle that zone, people will write you a check. If you can make them fear for the life, they'll write you a check. And yes, politics will become Hollywood, not just in the fact that people can become famous now and well known. It's become Hollywood in that it is a high profit business. It used to be you'd raise enough money. I think my first campaign, I raised and spent $1.5 million. That wouldn't get you through a state house race in Illinois now.
Wow. And that because was
money has become, it was a lot of money then. And so, I mean, it's with the Tea Party, the Tea Party Express, they claim that they're about fiscal conservatism. And then all of a sudden, everybody's getting into this cult and loving what this guy is saying. And then it's like, oh, that's how we can raise the cash. I sat in the Oval Office and heard Donald Trump say, we have to, reform entitlements and reform Social Security next term. And I remember thinking to myself, that's going to last to his very first speech when he sees the blue hairs in the crowd and just says to them, oh, I'm never going to touch your Social Security. And Charlie, that's exactly what happened because he didn't care about ideas.
No, he never did. So let's look ahead. Is our system prepared for what's going to happen in 2024? I know you've given a lot of thought to this. We now know that Speaker Mike Johnson is going to be presiding over the certification of the 2024 election. We know what the passions are going to be, the trials, everything. This is the ultimate stress test for democracy, isn't it?
It is. I look forward to 2028 and say I think it's going to be an amazing election cycle because there's going to have all new faces and all new energy. This one I worry about. And, we can have these guardrails in democracy, like off an interstate, for instance, and your car can hit guardrails and stay on the bridge and not fall into the river. If a second car comes along and hits that same guardrail, it's going to take it off the road and you're going to fall into the river. And the problem is now Trump and the Trump type folks have learned where the weaknesses are in the system. They accidentally tested the system. I think intentionally tested it, but accidentally tested the weak points in 2020. And I think now they're going to know exactly where the weak points are. And if Donald Trump wins, and by the way, anybody that thinks this is a done deal that, that Trump can't win, if it, I've heard a lot of people that just kind of scoff when I say, take him seriously. If they think he can't win, listen, he can win again. Nobody thought he could win in 2016. And I'm going to tell you, if he does get through and he wins this time, he's going to interview 100 candidates for attorney general and only take the one that says, like, Mr. President, in essence, I don't care what the Constitution is. I'm going to do whatever you want as your servant in the Department of Justice. That person is going to get selected to be attorney general. And we're going to find a system that is stressed beyond what even the founding fathers imagined it could be stressed to.
Who's he going to pick for a vice president, do you think?
Man, it's going to be somebody like Kristi Noem or an Elise Stefanik, I think. I think Nancy Mace is auditioning for it. I think it's going to be somebody that probably female and somebody that shows an absolute loyalty to him no matter what. And unfortunately, there's a huge list of people.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if it was Elise Stefanik. Okay, so where are you now Adam, you spent your whole political career as a conservative Republican. You've broken with your party. Talk to me about being out in the political wilderness, because there are some folks who feel that, okay, if you break with Trump, you now must become a liberal Democrat. What
Right.
where are you? How do you describe yourself? Where are you
Oh,
at?
well, I would consider myself politically the same kind of, I'd say center right, moderate on some things,
Hmm.
conservative on others that I've always been. I've had to come to peace with the fact that I don't need to be a member of a tribe because neither tribe I feel like I'm fully represented by. I've found new allies in the Democratic Party on the issue of democracy. But I also recognize that Democrats have to fight that fight within their party too, because there's some illiberal elements within it. Um, so I don't know. I just consider myself homeless. I'm maintaining the label of Republican because to me, I don't want to lose it. I don't want to give it up. I think it's important to maintain and to fight for. But I voted Democratic last election cycle, and if it's Trump against Biden, I intend to vote Democratic again. Because Charlie, I think there's only one thing on the ballot, at least in my mind, which is: do you support authoritarianism or democracy? And there's only one party that supports democracy.
So tell me a little bit about Country First, the organization you founded, which backs pro-democracy candidates. You back pro-democracy candidates who are both Republicans and Democrats at this point. How complicated is
Yeah, so
that?
it is complicated,
Mhm.
but because it violates how everybody's thought of politics. But our only requirement is that you put the country above the party, particularly if you're called to do so at the cost of your own career. We've started an academy that basically, because and you probably get this too. A lot of people come up and say, like, how do I start into journalism or how do I start into
Yeah.
politics? I get that a lot. How do I run for office? And so we're trying to teach people, here's what you have to do to run for
Yeah.
office. Here's the considerations. We do really good at institutional democracy building overseas. And I've come to now realize we have to do that at home. So that's what Country First is trying to do, is to be a democracy building organization at home. But I'd encourage people to go to country1st.com, the number 1st.com, and take a look at what we're doing.
Okay, one last question is, I put this in my newsletter today, and I expect to get a lot of reaction to it. You have your own Substack newsletter, which you devoted today to a warning to Democrats. You said that you have a problem, and it is the number of radicals who are pro-Hamas. Now, talk to me about this, because this is kind of circling back, because my sense is, reading that, is that you're remembering what we talked about earlier, which is our failure on the right to police our whack jobs, the extremists, the way we rationalize they're part of the coalition, they are our allies, they're not that important, and as a result, look where we're at now. So tell me why you decided that you were going to warn the Democrats. How serious a problem do they have with this? Because they will
I think they
say,
have a
there's
real,
no problem, we're all behind Joe Biden on Israel.
the number of Democratic Jewish friends I have that I have sent some of these things that have been said by other Democrats
Yeah.
to, they're surprised. They're not seeing this for some reason.
Yeah.
And, what we lived through, I remember being in Congress and having, Dana Rohrabacher be pro-Russia and thinking that was insane. And people like, oh, well, that's just Dana Rohrabacher.
Right.
And then, some people come along and you get Matt Gaetz kind of says something pro-Russian and like, and now I'd say over 50% of the party is at least Russian adjacent, sympathetic. That happened very quickly. And when under 30 years old of the self-identified Democrats are expressing more support for Palestinians and Hamas than they are in Israel, that's a problem. That's a ticking time bomb, literally. And I think Democrats have to take it seriously. This is not an attack by a Republican against Democrats. This is a warning from a Republican that has seen what's happened to his own party to Democrats to say, we've got to have one healthy party, and you guys are starting to cough a little bit, and you need to, go take your zinc or whatever and prevent this from happening.
Okay, so what do they have to do? What do they have to do about these extremes who right now seem like they're isolated in the fever swamps?
I think keep them isolated and speak out. When Rashida Tlaib, for instance, blames Israel for bombing something that is quite obvious later they didn't bomb, the Democrats, just like they called on every Republican to do, every time Donald Trump said something, the Democrats have to disavow that and say, we can't stop somebody. We had an open Nazi that would run as a Republican in Illinois every year. We couldn't stop that because all you have to do is get on the ballot. Democrats can't stop somebody from being a Democrat, but they can say that doesn't represent our values. And particularly pushing back in these colleges and universities that are poisoning the mind of young people to believe that it's okay to murder 1,400 people as long as it's in the name of anti-colonialism. If they speak out to that, I can't guarantee you're going to win that fight, but I guarantee you're going to do everything you can to win it, unlike what we've done.
Adam Kinzinger's new book is Renegade: Defending Democracy and Liberty in Our Divided Country. It is out today. Adam is also a senior political commentator for CNN and, as we just discussed, founded Country First, which backs pro-democracy candidates. So, Adam, congratulations on the book and best of luck.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Good to be with you.
And thank you all for listening to today's Bulwark podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes. We will be back tomorrow, and we will do this all over again.